a lot of people who start a business that's destined to fail even if they're successful.
Because they've not modelled it correctly. In this episode, we're joined by JC, Director of Foundry Gyms.
We've got 5 sites. We currently operate a small group personal training.
And now small group is massive all over the UK. And I think it's fair to say you've had a big part in being one of the first to bring it to the UK, doing it well. But obviously you helped 600 gyms to be able to improve their model.
You can't get past 100 members without just being you and driving a product. You probably shouldn't be doing it.
If you're struggling to get past 100 members, you've been really pushing for a while. What is that an indication of?
Most people are seriously undercapitalised. SGPT is good, but it's not the only way. I encourage people to do 1, 3 or 1, 5, 10 year planning and work back from there. I want to have this house, it's going to cost me this much. In turn, this is what I need to earn. You should consider that before you get going, because all you end up with is a business that's a noose around your neck. I think most of the challenges you're going to face as a multi-site operator are going to come from.
We hope you enjoy this episode. JC, thank you for coming down to the studio. I'm on your email list and I read many of them. One was the power on vitamin N, which is the power of saying no. So thank you for saying yes to coming down to the studio. Now, there's a lot of people that may know who you are and the impact you've had in the industry. But for those that don't, it'd be great just to get a quick run through of kind of your entry into the fitness industry and a bit of an overview of what you're currently doing now.
Keep it brief. I started broadly 20 years ago. I was working at a bank. I took a sabbatical, did my PT cert, started as a one-to-one PT, door-to-door. Opened my first studio in a tennis club at the Bourne Club in Farnham in Surrey. Built that up till I got married, sold that to another PT, sold them the list and the kit. Came back to London, worked as a freelance PT in the Harbour Club and Ultimate Performance. Worked under my own steam, and then opened the first W10 12 years ago as a one-to-one studio, 850 square foot. Vacated industrial unit. We put a mezzanine in. We grew that to 100 members. Moved to a bigger site, and that is grew that to 260 members. At some point, 5 years into that, we started people were copying us. So I got my initial response to be a bit pissed off, but my more grown-up response was to help people do that properly. We did that through a thing called the IFBA. We helped between 500 and 600 other owner-operators model some of the things we were doing. I guess think franchise without the brand, so you have more autonomy and more fluidity. It was sort of more built around the owner-operator than us as the franchisee or licensee. We didn't want to sort of hamstring people or make them do things in a certain way. We did that for 5 years. COVID struck. Bit of reflection from my end. Decided to do things a bit differently. We did actually relaunch the IFBA as an online education platform, and I was like, you know what, my heart's not in this, genuinely, even if it's successful. And now we rolled in W10 with Foundry. That was another pre-existing training gym business. And we, as of today, have 5 sites in London operating as Foundry.
So currently operating 5 sites. Can you just run us through the model, which is probably going to be quite obvious, and the price point? How many members of the team are there across the board, and members on average, if you could as well?
Yeah, we've got 5 sites. We obviously, in September 22, we put 2 businesses together that were running different models. So we had to transition those 2 businesses together, put them under one brand, under one operating system. That happened from effectively September 1, 2022. So we've had a year and a half, year and a bit to sort of pull all of that together. We currently operate a small group personal training model predominantly, where we offer a 6-to-1 coach to client ratio, and included in your membership are larger group classes which are complementary to your personal training. The sites have got anywhere between 150 at the smallest end and 250 at the other end. The models are built around 250 members. At 250 members, you would have 5 members of staff. At 150 members, you'd have 3 members of staff. And then we've got a central office team of 6 people doing marketing, operations, sales. We try and do as much of that centrally.
Nice. And is it fair to say that you were one of the first to bring small group to the UK? One of the first, if the first, or
I don't know if we were the first. We certainly, I would say, sort of pioneered it properly. We were the first ones to sort of take it and run with it. We were doing one-to-one training, and when I was a PT, I was doing long hours, I was earning good money. I had a salary number that I wanted to hit, and I was doing that. But the sacrifice was 60 hours a week of time, face time. I said, I need to find a model that allows me to keep that number, but have a bit more flex, kids and all the rest of it. So we went to small group PT. I flew out to the States. There was a guy out there called Alan Cosgrove. He's actually a Scottish guy working in California. Spent 3 days there, looked at what they did, came back, closed the business, our current business on the Monday. Reopened on the Friday, reopened the following Monday as something completely different as a small group PT gym. 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1. Today we're 6-to-1. So we've sort of been through the process every step. And I think we're probably the first ones to properly commercialise it.
And now, small group is massive all over the UK. And I think it's fair to say you've got a big part in being one of the first to bring it to the UK, doing it well. But obviously you've helped 600 gyms to be able to improve their model and their business overall. And that has had impact, all across the UK. But I imagine it looked quite different back then to how it does now in terms of operating the gym from a small group perspective. What was it like running a small group gym back then at the start compared to how it is now in terms of the standards? Like, how have the standards changed?
I don't think our own standards have changed at all. We still used to roll the towels in the same way that we roll the towels today.
And was that from kind of day one? It was always...
Yeah. I had the advantage I had is that I'd worked initially as a retail manager in BT shops, and I'd been through a process up to a regional level there, and then I went to work in retail banking at Halifax Bank of Scotland. So at a site level in a brick and mortar business. So there's a lot about the customer journey, KPIs, upselling, cross-selling. So I was able to transfer all of that into running a gym. So yes, I had an interest in fitness. Yes, I was a failed athlete and all of the rest of it, like most of the others. But I also did have, a background in retail and a brick and mortar business and some of the systems and understand systems and process that I was able to bring across. So I think we always had very high standards. Yes, our gyms look better today than they did 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, as the sector's evolved, and that's not just the training gym, as the London boutique scene has come about, and bright lights and glitzy fit outs, and it's forced everybody in the sector to sort of up their game. So the standards in terms of the overall aesthetic, I think has drastically improved. But in terms of our own internal operating frameworks and standards, I don't think that much has changed.
And that's all brought in from past experience in past professions.
I think there's some of that. I think there's also some part of who you are. Like one of the things I learned through going through the IFBA process and working with lots of different people is that having a bike doesn't make you a cyclist. So you can give people all of the tools and you can give people all of the information. You can't. Fundamentally, you always change the individual, and I've always been quite driven. I've always had quite high standards. I think it's a personal pride thing. I've always been very, I wanted us to look, and be and act and like the best. So I think there's something sort of, and I was sort of unrelenting about that. So I think one of the things that I have, and I think other decent gym operators, and I think any small business operator share, is that I wasn't prepared to accept other people's version of what good looked like, and sometimes to a fault. It's just that's just not good enough. We need to do better than that, and we've always been like that, and we're still like that today. And I think that's critically important. I think there's that, and I think we've always sort of realised that you need to put the customer journey is super important.
And when it came to that first location, did it just take off and grow quite quickly, or there are challenges that you came across, and if so, what were those challenges initially growing that first location?
The first location, in some ways, was the easiest one because you're in it all the time. I was coaching a lot. I was there a lot. So even it just happens by osmosis. You don't need to work. When I see people with less than 100 members worrying too much about marketing and branding and their why and all of the stuff that we sort of wrap around this to make it feel like it's more complicated than it should be. If you can't get past 100 members without just being you and driving a product, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So I think the first site for us was in some ways the easiest one. I think competition was less fierce. The consumer, was the early adopter. I think so people have got more choice now. So I think there were in lots of ways it was the easiest one. And we made mistakes as we went. Now when you're opening new sites from scratch and you open the doors and you need to fill them quickly, it's much more difficult.
And so if you are struggling to get past that 100 member mark quite naturally in terms of just through coaching on the floor, delivering a great product, that word of mouth factor, what is that an indication of in the business? Because obviously we can't specifically pinpoint every individual, but what if you're struggling to get past 100 members, you've been really pushing for a while, what is that an indication of?
I think 100 members is just an arbitrary number, but there's some barrier to, once you're into to more than 100 members, it becomes more, it needs to become more complex. But it could be down to lots of things. Some people just aren't cut out to be anything more than really good personal trainers. There's just a natural thing that everybody thinks that if you're a good PT, you should become a gym owner. But I think that's absolutely not true for the vast majority of people. They'd be better off just being really, really good personal trainers. And they could probably make more money doing that than they would running a gym, because to run a gym, you have to be a much better communicator. You can learn some leadership skills, but you have to have some innate leadership and communication skills. So some of it could be wrong location. A lot of people pick the cheapest lease in the crappiest area. They've got no visibility. They've got no budget. Most people are seriously undercapitalised. I think 10 years ago you could open on a shoestring in a bit of a shithole and get away with it. I don't think you can do that as easily now. I think it's much more difficult because within a stone's throw there will be a decent SGPT gym on your doorstep.
Do you think people have to now go in more with a lot more funding to open their first gym? I think I remember on one of your podcasts that you used to do that back in the day. It was people smashing a tire with a hammer, and it was a bit more. The standard wasn't as high in terms of the aesthetic of the gym, and you could get away with opening on a shoestring budget. But do you think now you have to go more in?
I don't know if you have to go more in. I think There's different ways of going about it, right? The easiest way to do this is to be a PT, build up a client list of 30 to 60 people, and transition them into a gym. Be one of two coaches that work there, work your arse off all day, every day, build that up to 80 members, get another coach in, go to 100 members, and that it just grows organically. And it's just a matter of time. If you're good and people gravitate towards you, and I don't think there's a system for that, but if you're good and people gravitate towards you, that will grow. If you're going to do it from scratch with 0 members, and you're going to rock up in Hayward Heath with 0 members in a new market and go from scratch, where you need a good reception, you need a marketing budget, you need to bring a decent brand to market, you need a team of 2 or 3 just to make that viable. You might not want to do all the hours yourself. I think that does need properly funding. I think it's very difficult now to walk in particularly city markets and try and do it on a shoestring like we did.
Let's say that my product isn't good enough. Maybe I'm struggling with members, and I know that the product isn't good enough. What key aspects of that product and the service that I provide do I need to be looking at and pinpointing as areas that need improvement within the service?
I mean, product is a really broad description for, it could be one of lots of things, but fundamentally at the beginning, you are the product.
So the individual, the personality.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, people buy PT from people. We're not selling something tangible. We're selling a feeling or an experience. Right? It's not, you don't give me something back that I can go, well, that was it's a completely it's subjective. Right? So it is down to the person. And I think some of it is, there are some people, it's very rarely that people don't know what they're doing from a technical standpoint when it's not working. Most people know how to get people to squat and to teach to hinge and whatever else. I think from an SGPT standpoint, I think there are some people who are just not naturally set up to run sites and do it at scale. I think people do it too early. SGPT is good, and it is a good way to scale, and it is a good way to make money, but it's not the only way. You can do that through one-to-one. You can do that online, and if you do it, you have to be a very good one-to-one coach first before you start trying to do 2 people at the same time, or 3 people, or 4 people, or 6 people, because it's still personal training. And if you can't, effectively coach 1 person, then maybe don't try and do 4 or 6.
And so where you're at 1 to 6 at the moment, if someone was looking to transition from 1-to-1 to small group, would you recommend they do 1-to-2, 1-to-3 initially before they crack that, and then start to up the numbers when they're looking to scale? If
somebody was going to start a small group PT business, I'd recommend they start with the financial viability of it, because people get het up on 1-to-4. Should I do 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-6? I don't think in the end it makes too much difference. But most people, let's say that you're in a London market and you've got certain rents and for certain overheads, rent, staffing, whatever. Obviously, if you do 6-to-1, there's less of a staffing requirement than there is if you do 4-to-1, all things being equal. So you might not be able to, it might not be financially viable to run a 4-to-1 model. Equally, if you've only got 1,000 square foot and you can only charge 150 quid in your local market, you might not be able to do 4 or 6-to-1. You might have to go 10 or 12 to make any money. So I think the level of service that you offer, whether it's 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 10, 12, 1 to 16, a lot of it has to be, firstly, it has to be viable.
Yeah, so there's a question before that question, essentially, in terms of actually, you mentioned this earlier off air, in terms of modelling. And do you think that's where a lot of people initially go wrong? They don't actually kind of model the business correctly before they kick things off?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. There's a lot of people who start a business that's destined to fail even if they're successful.
Because they've not modelled it correctly.
Yeah,
they've done everything right. They've done great sessions. They've got really great retention, low attrition, and they still fail or don't make any money because they fundamentally made the wrong mistakes at the start.
Yeah, because they don't either charge enough or the model's wrong or they overpay staff. And I think it doesn't have to be super complicated. It can be. We run super complicated models now when we're looking at viability of sites. But at a base level, it's like, okay, well, if I've got this amount of space, and these are going to be my overheads, back of a fag packet, and I'm going to charge this amount of these 200 people, this 200 quid a month, and I'm going to do 40k a month. 40k a month of income generated minus whatever it's going to cost me to run that. Take off my VAT and all the rest of it. What money do I make? And if I am making money, does it fit in with my income expectation? Right. So if I want to earn a certain amount of money every month or every year, I have a salary expectation. Is the model that I'm building at capacity, and working back from there? Do those things go together? Because if they don't, then don't start.
So really figure out those numbers beforehand. Is there any advice you can give people that are listening that maybe haven't done that, of like a good practical way to sit down and figure that out? I know you've kind of just ran through it there slightly.
It's not an exact science. I think you'd have to go through it and get someone who's far more qualified in Excel than I to help you with that. But at a base level, I think some of these. The truth is that the most single site training gyms are not sellable. It's a cash business. You're not going to sell your business. It's too big for your coach to buy, and it's too small for a proper investor, be that private or institutional. Right. So it's a cash business. There is no exit. The exit, because it's all on you as well.
So if you're going to go into this business or you own a gym, you're doing it because you love it and you want this to be your life rather than you want to build something and sell it. I think also you need to be a bit careful that you don't need to. You haven't got to sort of. You can change your mind as you go. This isn't the final decision you're going to make. You don't have to sit here on day one and go, well, I know exactly where my life's going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. I encourage people to do 1, 3 or 1, 5, 10 year planning and work back from there and say, look, are the things we're doing in the next 12 months congruent with where we want to be in 5 years and in turn where we want to be in 10 years? And, I look at personal, professional and physical as 3 buckets, if you like, that people should consider. But if you're saying to me that in 5 years time, I want to have this house on this road in this town, it's going to cost me this much, I need this deposit, this is what my monthly outgoings are going to be, and in turn this is what I need to earn, this is what I need to build a business that will service that, then I think you should consider that before you get going. Because if you don't, what's the point? Because all you end up with is a business that's a noose around your neck. You put in more hours than you're supposed to and you take out less from it than you want to. That is literally the worst combination possible. And that's most people's reality. And then because we are type A, ego-driven, fitness people, we're stubborn. Why is that most people's reality? Is it just because they go, I want a gym, let's do it, and move forward and don't consider those 3 aspects that you just referenced?
I think there's that, and I think that people are all too quick to copy other people's models and pricing structures, and well, if it works for Bob in that location, it'll work for me in this location. Well, it's not necessarily the case, because Bob is completely different to you and will have different goals and different things. So I think people just don't think it through enough, and I don't mean that as a criticism. There's absolutely no way that I worked back from where I wanted to be at the end. I made this mistake myself. And if you have done that, the simple way to do it is to get out a fresh piece of paper and say, if I was starting this business again tomorrow, what would I build? If I have a space that will take this many people in this model, in this way, at this average visits on this timetable, and I times it by this yield and I take away these expenses, does it fit my what I want, fundamentally. Not what I can talk to other people about on a podcast or in a gym owner group or gym owners group or anything like that. But does it fundamentally serve what I want from my life? At least for now, until I change my mind.
And you mentioned that one person will see that person running the gym in a different location in the UK and go, right, I'll copy that model and that pricing structure. What advice would you give to someone in terms of figuring out what to price their service at within their area? Do they need to do a bit of research on competition? Like what steps should they take to figure out what's the best pricing? And of course, I know their expenses are going to come into it as well, but what steps would you take to figure out how you should charge your service?
I think obviously, if you're running a big box gym, there are companies that can do demographic surveys that can give you some sort of data around these things that can make it easier to make decisions. To my knowledge, that doesn't exist for the boutique or the training gym space. I think some of it, most markets will tolerate a certain price point. Right, there are some more mature markets that there's people already there that have pushed the price point for our services. So you're not bringing a new concept or a new price or a new way of thinking about fitness into the market. It's a bit like headphones, right? There was a day when we all just used to buy 10 quid headphones and chuck them in the bin, right? And we just used to repeat that 10 to, and if you paid 19 or 24 quid for a pair of headphones, you were getting the decent ones. Now people pay 200 quid, 150 quid minimum for a pair of headphones, up to 500. You can spend stupid money on headphones, but it's normal now to spend 200, 250 quid on headphones because the market's moved. And that's what's happened in the training gym space. It's normal now for people to spend more money on their fitness. It's not like it used to be. But I think in terms of determining your own price point, I think some of it is just sort of, most people can open gyms in their location where they come from. Right? That would be my advice to most people. Don't try and open a gym in a market you don't know and understand. So you might be lucky enough to have some sort of local barometers. Some of it's going to be a bit of a best guess, educated guess, be a bit of a punt. But if you're in a low-income area and you need to charge double what you think you can charge, then maybe that product in that market in that way is not the right fit. Maybe you go 12 to 1 or 15 to 1. You have to do a different product. You can still make it premium. You can still make the experience good. But some of it I think is going to be intuition and a bit of local knowledge. There isn't a science that I know of. There's no company that can do the data analysis for you.
If you are in a location that's got a few small group options and you're kind of middle of the pack, is that a good place to be, or would you encourage people to go further and be the highest, or is there an advantage in your eyes there if you do have a lot of competition?
I think if you can't be number one or number two in the local market, it's probably going to be difficult for you to compete, whatever compete means to you. I think for most people now, the answer is to charge a bit more and give a better service, because I think if you're going to run a successful training gym or a small group PT gym, at the end of the day, most of our clients are not going to be purely price sensitive. It's actually more about value proposition than it is about price. So what we need to do is to work hard to be the best, the least friction, the best booking systems, the best customer journey and the best experience, and charge accordingly. Most people, if you price yourself at mid-market and do mid-market things, I think you're going to find it very difficult, as the broader sector is bearing out.
And so we've kind of touched on this kind of first location, and there's a lot of people that are thinking about or have their second location. Now, there's some people that have had their second location, it's been a great success. There's some that may have got their second location and maybe it wasn't the right idea, but they got carried away for a number of reasons. What position should your first location be in before you consider going into your second?
I think that's difficult to be precise.
It's quite general, right?
Well, I think some people will say, well, get your first one to capacity, make sure you've got all the answers, and then go and do a second one. And that's one way of doing it. Other people will say, well, once you get to a certain milestone, say 150 of 200 members, then go to your next one. Depend on your funding, your central team, whether it's a partnership or whether you're solo, whether you've got people in behind you that can help you drive the business. And there'll be lots of factors at play. The truth is that most second sites fail. That's the truth. Most of these businesses, people don't realise just how much the business is leveraged on them until they can't be in one place at one time. once you do multiple sites, you realise how easy it is to run one site, because all of the energy is channeled into that front door, into that building, into that team, into those customers, and you've got your best people, all eyes on that one space. It is difficult to do a second location. For most people, I think I think if you're doing the second location, if you can rinse and repeat, and you can make a bit of profit on it, and you double your income, but you're going to have to go through that 1 or 2 years of pain to get it to a point where it makes money, and you're going to have to fund it. Now, for most people, the risk in terms of the cash risk, if they're self-funded, is not super high. It's not terminal. If it doesn't work, you just shrink back to your first location. You learn some things, and the first location will be better for it in the long term. So it's not. I don't think most people can lose. It might cost them a bit of money and a bit of time, but I think there's more reasons than just making more money to open a second location for people.
Yeah,
they're inquisitive about it. There's the what if.
Do you think some people maybe open the second for the wrong reasons?
I think it's a bit like I was a PT, therefore I'll own a gym, and now I own a gym, so I'll do a second one.
It seems like the natural progression that a lot of other people do, so I'll do it as well.
Yeah, I think you've just got to be very considered about it. Again, it's like, what do I want from this? Now, if you've got investors and stuff, it's a different conversation. But most people listening to this probably haven't. They're probably either self-funded or they've got a small bit of investment from either a member or a family member. I think it's about what do I want to take from this. And for a lot of people, I think they do it because they want a different set of challenges, different set of conversations, and I think to do a second site and do a third site, if you do them well, actually it can be a really good way of generating 2-3 times the income at maturity. Now the truth is that your first site won't be as good once it's part of a small chain of 2 or 3. Our gym will never be as better as when we had 80 members and we were beating the crap out of people with sledgehammers and tyres. Not literally with a sledgehammer, but there was a ferocity and a visceral feeling to that gym and that training that we'll never have again, and for lots of good reasons. So there is a bit of dilution as you scale. I think that is almost inevitable. Even if your intention is to keep the standard, keep the product, I just think it's inevitable that there is at least an element of dilution. And
what aspect do you think gets taken away from the initial gym? Is it that personality or community, or just the fact that your energy isn't 100% in there and it can't be as good? Or
well, I think if you've got if you've got 4 members of staff per site, you got, instead of having 4 people to rally, to galvanise, to recruit, to engage, to draw energy from and get them bought in, you've now got 12. Now you've got 12 different set of circumstances. We did a thing with James Kerr, the author of Legacy, for the IFBA once, and he said something to me. He's like, and he was working with West Ham, I think, at the time, doing some stuff for the football team, and he said to me, no matter how well the team's playing, there's always somebody kicking the cat, and he was referencing Kurt Zouma. But I was just like, that's absolutely brilliant, because there's always somebody or something happening. And if you just law of averages says, if you've got 3 sets of open doors, there's always going to be some shit to shovel, and there's going to be more of that in 3 sites than there is in 1.
There's always going to be a fire to put out. There's always going to be something that you have to deal with,
and it will almost certainly it's always going to be people related. Now you might have members that aren't happy about an aspect of what you're doing, and that there's because even if you've got 1,000 members and you've got 95% satisfaction rate, you still got enough people there to make it quite noisy and quite uncomfortable. Even at 200, if you've got 10 of those people that are kicking off at any one time, you've still got lots of happy bunnies in the building. You've still got people who want to say stuff. You multiply that by a second site or a third site, it is more difficult. And then I think most of the challenges you're going to face as a multi-site operator are going to come from your staff, because it's about getting the right people, it's about getting the right bums in the right seat at the right time for the right length of time.
And you mentioned staff in there, and a lot of people always say, it's really hard to find the right staff or get the right PT. They get someone in, they don't stay for very long, there's high churn of staff, or then they steal a bunch of members and they go off and do their own thing. How do you ensure that you get the right people into your gym? Like what's the best practice to do that initially?
I would counter and say that there are lots of good staff. There are some shit ones, but there are also lots of rather shitty gym owners.
I agree with that, actually, because there's so many people saying, you can't get the right staff, but actually I think a bit of a reflection needs to take place, because that person's first time becoming a leader or a manager, and that's a completely different job role to being a PT and then run the gym on your own or with one or two people.
I think that's absolutely true. I think also I don't see most people have problems with staff at the beginning. Most people are able to recruit their second member of staff and third member of staff, and they get good people that they're happy with at the beginning. The bit that I see people run into problems with is a year later, right? Because the fact of the matter is, if you've got someone, we talk in our gym, it's sort of, 2 to 3 year shelf life on someone who's there to coach. Some people move on in the business and do stuff that, more administration, earn more money, but there's only so much we're going to pay somebody to coach in the business. So, of course, there'll be some natural churn. And any team needs an element of natural churn. If I walk into a team and they're telling me that it's great because everyone's been there at least 3 years, I know that team is stagnant and flat and needs a rocket, right? My observation is that most gym owners run into problems with people after the first year or two because they're not great communicators, they're not great leaders, but I think there's some practical stuff like they pay shitty salaries. So they pay shitty salaries and there's no progression within the business. If you've got one building and one gym and you've got 3 or 4 members of staff, you might have one person who has a bit more commercial responsibility than the rest, but ultimately there's no career pathway for those people. Where do they go? If they've got if good people are good team members are going to be entrepreneurial in spirit, most of them, particularly the young ones. So you're always going to run the risk of wanting them to leave, and actually you want them to go on and do better things.
So you should expect to have an off ramp with some people at a point in time at about that 3 year mark, and be okay with that.
And contract in that way up front and say, look, this is the way this is the way it works. You might not want to do that on day one, but you might certainly want to do that through the first 6 to 12 months. Because what you end up with people is that, I've had people who have been absolutely brilliant, coaches on the first 6, 12, 2 years they were there. Then they stay for 4 or 5 years and they become the fucking pain in the arse. Sorry, I'm not allowed to swear. They become a pain in the arse. And we have a negative experience. And it's not necessarily just their fault. We just haven't managed it properly, and we didn't have difficult conversations, and they got restless, they got frustrated, and they sort of weren't brave enough to move on, and we weren't brave enough to move them on, and they remain in situ, and it becomes toxic. I see that a lot.
In one of your, I think it was your most recent email, you spoke about communication with the team, and you should be able to have candid conversations with the team members, but not just in formal settings in terms of reviews. It can just be on day-to-day or informal conversations. And it'd be great to hear about a bit more about that and why that level of communication is important within the business.
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of, obviously we've got HR systems and processes and people have to be protected through how they're employed, and we have certain things that we need to do, but I'm not a massive fan of communicating through structure, as in, let's sit down, Charlie, and talk about how you're going. Because the fact of the matter is that we should already be having that conversation on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, and if we do need to have an intervention, we're sort of already doing that, and if it needs to be formal, then fine. But for me, at the end of the day, I don't think with the odd exception, people aren't fundamentally bad. They're not, they want to do a good job. They've got personal and professional pride. They really want to and they're prepared to put a shift in. What I have learned is that, it's a bit like your customers, right? Where there's a gap between expectation and reality, that's where there's frustration. What we've got to try and do with our, if you promise your customers this result, but actually the reality is, the expectations are going to get you lose 10 kilos, but the reality is that they're eating shit and drinking and they're doing all the things that there's a gap between their expectation and their behaviour and the outcome they're going to get. We need to close that gap by just saying, look, if you don't stop doing some of these things, this isn't going to work out for you. So I think we need to take the same candid approach with staff. I have a very clear message to the team. It's like we talk to people, not about people. And I'll always want to say, look, Charlie, you're clearly, got a bit of a pickle up your arse today, or, what's happening here, and, what's going on, and let's go for a coffee and let's talk it through. I'm equally very happy to say to people, look, you've been here for a long time. We're probably not going to be able to move you through the business in the way that you want, or your salary expectations now are beyond that, which we can cater for. Let's make a plan. But don't sit here for 6 months too long and get grumpy. Let's manage it. So either we can move you on in the business, and you might have a skills gap or an experience gap or something we can close to move you forward. And if we can't, and it's time to move you on, let's manage that process well.
And do you think that that's where a lot of issues come? So there's no progression, there's no communication, they build up resentment because of that, and then that kind of leaks out in their day-to-day attitude, essentially.
I think there's definitely an element of that. I think there's also an element of like, well, if I'm sort of running most of the business and not getting paid for it, well, I'll just go and do it myself. Now, we've only ever had one incident, and that was recent, where we've had a member of staff leave and take a significant amount of members with them, and that was some legacy stuff that we've inherited. Most of our team haven't gone on necessarily to open gyms and do that well, but they have gone on to do successful online businesses or go on to do one-to-one PT and be very good at it. I just think the onus is on us as the employee, as the employer, to lead that conversation and to encourage the team to have a voice. And if they're not happy about something, say so. People don't like having difficult conversations. They just don't. And whether you're an employee or an employer, that's just the way that most humans are. We don't like confrontation. We see confrontation as bad. I think confrontation, not only do I not mind it, I actually actively seek it sometimes, and not in a combative way, but in a, look, we need to talk about this. And neither of us is necessarily comfortable in this space, but let's talk about it. Let's see if we can find common ground, and if we let's work through it.
And did you learn any lessons from that person that left and took a large amount of clients? Was that a difficult situation to deal with? Were there any lessons learned from your part or reflections at all?
It was something we inherited from Foundry. They'd been there for a long time. The truth of the matter is that they got a little bit too much rope to set culture. I actually said at one point when we took over, that's not our gym. It belongs to that coach. So we're going to need to sort of try and restructure that dynamic. And that was just because of the way that most SGPT gyms are protected from that, because of the way they're built, right? The way they're put together. And that's one of the things that people don't talk about as often, is that an SGPT model actually is more defensible because the relationship is with the gym and with the team and not a single individual. So the lesson is that I wouldn't you need to follow the rules or the processes we've laid out, because if you don't, you get that.
And you've mentioned at that 1 year mark people might flag off, or that's when people have issues. It's not at the start, it's at 1 year mark. What progression can you give someone within the gym to keep them happy until they get to their sort of natural end towards that 3 year mark? What incentives and progression can you provide those people?
1 year is obviously earlier, but most people will come into your business for the first year. It's the best thing since sliced bread. Right, everything's great. It's new stimulus. It's the honeymoon period for 6 months, and then 6 months everything's cracking. Second year, shifts are a bit, not great or as good, and certain niggles start to flag in the second year. So it's not as brilliant, but still good. And then beyond the 2 years, people start to think about what's next. I think what some people do is they make someone a programming manager, or they put them into sales. I think the key thing is, rather than just sort of saying, put them into this position, it's like, look, Charlie, what are your drivers? I want to make money. Okay, well, we're not going to pay you anymore to be a coach, but what we do need is a salesperson. So how's about we create a sales role for you, or you move into a sales role that already exists, and this is the earning potential in that role.
And are you happy for a coach to also sell, or should they do one or the other, or is there room for a hybrid role there?
I think everybody's always selling. And you need a sales culture. A lot of the gym owners that I speak to think they've got one salesperson, who might be the person on the phone, or might be the person who does their evaluations, or assessments, whatever they want to call them. But the reality is, if you don't have a team of people who are selling, because you're selling in every conversation. Yeah. If you don't have a team of people who are selling, and asking members if you're going to sign up and what you think, and trying to move the conversation forward, you're always going to find it difficult. And I say that not to be pedantic, but I don't think most people think about it in that way, and that's why they. And
so when you say sales, you mean even the customer that comes in and the coach interaction with them, they're kind of making a sale in that moment. Is that what you're?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything is a sell and a resell. You're reselling to people every time they come back into the gym, and that we have this thing in the fitness sector where we think sales is murky. Sales is influence. Sales is just influence and communication. It's just getting people to see things the way that you think they should see it, the way you see it, however you want to define it. But sales isn't like taking someone's money off them because you're a shit. Which has a negative connotation. And I hear people say, and I'll sort of segue a bit, I know lots of PTs who don't make any money. It's like, good PTs. It's like, no, you don't. Because that's how you keep score, right? If as a gym owner, you've got 200 people paying you 200 quid, you're a better gym owner than someone who's got 100 people and paying them 100 quid or 200 quid. It's how you keep score. You're serving more people, you're providing more service, because there's a direct correlation between service and spend. So, and I think that's an important thing for people to recognise as owners, and for them in turn to pass on to their teams, which I don't think happens that well. In terms of having coaches sell or do any other type of hybrid role, if you like, because that's what people do, right? It says, all right, I've got a good coach and they want to earn more money. What I'll do is I'll give them a management role, or I'll give them a sales role, or they can do our marketing. But the truth is, and I'm like, okay, well, that's okay, but what experience have they got in those roles to be able to do them successfully? Well, I'm just going to show them. Okay, well, what experience do you have and track record do you have in each of those areas to be able to effectively bring them to the level that you want the business to get to? And I think you end up putting people who are fundamentally really good people, good coaches, good technicians and all the rest of it, moving into sales roles. They're not money driven. You can't put someone in a sales role that doesn't like a pound note, right? That doesn't work. So you have to have salespeople, in my view, especially at scale, you have to have salespeople doing sales roles. You have to have coaches doing coaching roles. You have to have people who fully understand marketing and data and all the nitty gritty that goes with it to be in that marketing role. You can't just have someone who's a coach and go, right, you do the marketing. Right, you're going to do our Facebook ads. There's just more to it.
Just for the sake of putting them into a certain role, essentially.
To pay them an extra 200 quid a month.
Yeah.
And the reality is that by the time you take tax off some of these things, you're not paying people extra anyway. It's such a short-term thing. If you sort of, I've got a coach, they're on arbitrary number, 30 grand a year, and they want to earn more money. So I'll pay them 35 grand, and you're going to do one or two things. Either you're going to squeeze more hours out of them, and you'll crush them, and that won't last. Or you'll give them a job, say marketing, that they don't understand and they can't be successful in. And then, of course, if they're not successful in their marketing job, it has a negative impact on their coaching job, and then they become a shit coach.
And it just makes the whole situation worse, essentially.
You've got a really bad situation. So I don't see it work. There are, of course, exceptions. I don't see it work that well when people give their coaches hybrid roles, and they do it for the wrong reasons for the most part.
I think with the kind of single site operators, a lot of them will pass on sales because they don't like it. And they go, I'll just let him do sales. And then what happens is that sales struggle and the business starts to struggle as well. But I do believe like sales is probably obviously one of the most important aspects of any business, and you've got to be willing to get those reps in and do the numbers if you want to have a successful gym. Do you agree with that to a degree?
I agree with it 100%. To run a good gym business or a good any business, you need to have a good sales process. You need a good salespeople, and you need a sales culture. And you also need to embrace the fact that sales is important, right? Because there's no good being, a lonely perfectionist. And there's loads of them sitting around in gym spaces whom, for whatever reason, whether it's part of their identity or part of their defensive pattern or whatever it is that they get into, they just think sales is bad and I'm not going to do it. I used to be one of them, right? We didn't do any marketing to get to 100 plus members, and that used to be like the badge of honor. Then we get to 150 and realise we're not going anywhere without some marketing and sales and some budget around it. We've got a dedicated salesperson. In fact, we've got two centrally that do sales for the gyms. They're not done on site. We have the site teams.
And so they're in the central office and they'll do them for all 5 sites.
Yeah. And they work alongside an internal marketing person, because we have the luxury now, given the scale, to have somebody inside we don't outsource it because we've got our own function, who runs who heads up our digital stuff. And they geek out on data at as I'm sure you guys are well aware, they geek out at data at every step of the pathway, and we pay our salespeople well. We incentivize them really heavily. Like what I see with a lot of training gym owners, they give sales to a reluctant trainer, and then they pay him pittance for the pleasure. Or worse, they put in sales targets or revenue targets they know they're not going to have to pay out on. Right, so they'll go, right, Charlie, you're going to do sales, and we're going to do these targets, and I'm going to pay you 10 grand more a year, arbitrary number. but deep down you're never going to hit those targets.
What's a good structure? What is the structure you have in place at your gym for your salespeople at the moment to incentivize them to hit their targets?
So they're on a base, and then they are directly. So our salespeople we have a low barrier front end offer. We do a 21-day challenge, and we have targets around that. So let's say we want to sell 100 of those a month, and that feeds into 50% conversion. This number of levers that gives us a growth. Site level and group level growth of this, which feeds into our financial model. So the KPIs talk to the model, but we pay them a base, and we pay a slightly higher base because we have a more grown up salesperson, a more experienced salesperson. I think you can do this one of two ways. You can either take a junior salesperson who's fresh, bright eyed, bushy tailed, and will work their arse off, but they're less good in less good in conversation, they're less nuanced, they're a bit more bullish. And that might work in some markets with some products. We have someone who's a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and we didn't recruit them from the training gym sector. They came from the big box gym. They came from Nuffield. So they're a different flavour to the rest of the team, to the extent where sometimes the rest of the team think the guy's a bit of a knob because he's a sales animal. He's not. He's different. He's wired differently to the rest of the team. And then we directly bonus him monthly and quarterly and annually on performance, but that performance is linked directly to our targets. We set him stretch targets. So if you hit 110% of target, we'll give you a stretch bonus, but we pay out on on targets. Our salespeople earn really well, but that's what makes them good salespeople. Yeah. What we would never do is set them targets that just are not achievable, because every month, firstly, we're having poor performance conversations, and secondly, they're completely demoralised.
I think with a salesperson as well, it's an investment, and you get out what you put in, essentially. So if you're going to try and scrimp on getting someone, that's probably going to replicate the result you're going to get. Again, not in all cases, but being able to pay extra for someone that knows what they're doing, can handle the phone, just is going to pay back a lot.
I think the truth is, for most owner-operators, most training gym owners, or SGPT gym owners, is that actually they run pretty small, they run pretty lean, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? So they resource the business to the extent that it currently warrants, right? So I don't need a full-time salesperson because I only do so many front-end challenges, and I can't afford to have somebody there. I can't justify it. So they'll outsource their marketing to FMA. They'll try and do the sales themselves, or they'll do it with the in-house team. It's not as effective as it needs to be. They'll talk about shit leads. They'll talk about how the marketing's crap. But the reality is that you're going to have to shovel through shit. That's what a salesperson prepared to do. They're not prepared to do that, but they can't justify resourcing an out-and-out salesperson. My view in most people's cases, and the conversation I have is like, could you afford, arbitrary number, a couple of grand a month to have somebody? Like, what would you need to sell to make that couple of grand base back? Because if you took the punt, I reckon in 3 to 6 months' time, your business would be in a completely different position if you just had a dedicated salesperson. That might be the single biggest impactful thing you could do on your business, because you're getting the leads, right? You are getting whatever it is. We get 300 to 400 leads a month. We know that it's a 30-35% lead to trial, challenge uptake. So we can sort of go, well, we can justify the resource. Most gyms would be way better off in the next year or two if they just put a proper sales provision in.
I think another mistake people make is they expect them to come in and sell straight away. In terms of like straight out the gate, they're smashing it. Now, if there's someone experienced, you probably have an expectation for that to happen sooner. But a lot of people need to realise there's kind of an on-ramp stage when someone comes in, probably like a coach, right? They'll come in and they'll shadow some sessions, and then they'll maybe be monitored. I'm not sure the exact approach, but it's the same with the sales staff. They need to kind of be geared up to get to a point of where you need to be hitting them. And typically that could be up to a month, where that first month they might not hit it out the park. Did you have that with your sales staff, or do they just smash it out the park straight away?
The same with coaches. Most people pull in coaches and they think from day one that coach should deliver an ROI. The reality is that some of them might need 4 to 12 weeks to just get under the skin of the business, understand it, and learn as they go. And in 12 weeks' time, they'll be what you need them to be. So you will be a bit worse, and it will cost you a bit for that period of time. But I don't think you can expect in sales or coaching to have somebody walk in and on day one. There will be exceptions, but at day one be, you can pay for the privilege to get someone who can do that. But if you're trying to bootstrap, which is most people who listen to this is reality, and you're paying less of a base and you've got less experience, you are going to have to work with that person. There is going to be a period where they don't make you money, but you got to model it and take yes, I might be less profitable today and next month and even next quarter, But actually, if I forecast forward a year or two, actually the changes I'm going to make today and the sacrifice I'm going to make over the next 1 to 3 months are going to pay dividend later on.
How do you embed a sales culture into the team? Whenever I speak publicly, at the start, if it's on the topic of sales, I say, who here feels a bit icky about sales? And you generally get over 50% of people put their hands up. So there's so many people that don't like sales. I know we've spoken about that, but how do you embed that sales culture into a team where naturally a lot of them may not gravitate towards it?
I think it's actually reasonably difficult on, especially in a smaller team who are coaches, trainer heads, because they're not naturally salespeople. They don't think that way. They're not wired that way. We've done a few key things to try and build a sales culture. I wouldn't say that every single person in our gym, our group is an outright sales animal, but I think at the very least now everybody to an extent understands the importance of the numbers. So I think first thing we've done is understand the numbers. We publish those numbers, so we're very transparent about.
You share with all the team and everything that's going on.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to share all the X's and O's, but we share all the KPI data, and we have weekly, monthly, quarterly. We put those numbers front and center, so everybody knows that challenge sales are important. Everybody knows that what the conversion target is. Everybody knows their attrition number. So we basically we keep front of mind the numbers that we want to prioritize, and we incentivize the behavior that we want to see. Is one of the biggest things maybe we've done in the last 18 months is that we incentivize sales behavior.
And so how do you do that with the other staff? Or do the coaches, obviously they get a challenge in, they've got a, do you have a metric for conversion rate from front end to back end?
Yeah, so ours in the model is 50%.
Yeah.
Different sites run differently. We've got some that run more challenges than others and their conversion might be a bit lower for argument's sake. We've got some that might run less challenge but conversions are higher. And obviously it links back into net growth because there's so many different things that affect growth, right? Conversions, how many front end you sell is one thing, the rate of conversion another, the rate of attrition is another, and then of course you've got yield and LTV, which all play a part in the bottom line. So it's not you can't take a reductionist, it's not the world through a straw type stuff. So there's lots of moving parts. Ours in our model is 50% conversion from challenge to because in our market and the way that we operate, that's what's in our model. Some sites are better, and we have a head coach in each site. Because each site needs to feel like a local site, and the person in there needs to feel like an owner operator, because otherwise it doesn't work.
And just going back to the team section, you said about that progression, having that head coach feel like the owner operator, is that how that person will get that progression within and that fulfillment from their work? Well,
that's the role, and we were like, they feel like an owner operator, but they're also paid like it. So they're on a base. In our case, it's a base of between 40 and 50, depending on the size of the site and the location. It's a London market, so and then we pay them direct commissions on conversion. So we pay them 50 quid a unit on conversions, and then we give them a quarterly bonus if they hit their 50%.
Nice. And are the other coaches given some sort of incentive with, or is it just a head coach to steer the team?
The head coach is to steer the team. Now, obviously, the lead, there's a number 2 who works with the head coach. Now, they know that when the head coach leaves, or there's some succession planning built in, basically. They get a bit more responsibility, maybe around retention, and we might pay some discretionary bonus stuff, and we might put some, if we're going to run a specific challenge or a specific, we might sort of incentivize that. Okay, the gym that gets the biggest number of sign-ups will get a pair of Nikes, or but it's built around that main owner operator, and they earn really well, those people. So the only way they would leave is that they earn probably more with us than they would managing a big David Lloyd or a big Equinox or and they get some commercial responsibility and challenge, but they can earn from it, and they're in a really good environment.
And are they enabled to kind of make decisions within the business? You kind of mentioned like each one's treated differently. So are they able to kind of go out and just make decisions, or do they still have to consult the kind of head office if they want to? Or does it depend on what that decision is?
But we have very clear systems and processes and blueprints for people to work from, but they are encouraged to use their judgment. And we have some that show better judgment than others in different situations. But actually, in the most part, we have to work harder to get them to deviate from we don't want to spoon feed people. It's getting that balance right between giving people enough guidance, but also giving them enough an autonomy. We don't want robots. We want people to display a bit of personality, and we want people to use their judgment.
But you also don't want people that kind of dominate the culture, essentially like that other person that left there. So is it a challenge to find that balance between systems and
there's obviously enough different members of staff, and the management team are very hands-on. We're not a bloated business. All of the management team are feet on the boots on the ground. I don't think there's any one person that would dominate that culture, because they've got systems and processes, and the way that our diary works is people work in patterns and on shifts, and so it's a shared member, if you like, shared client. We have some people that train in we have some people that have their home membership, if you like, and then they visit other sites because they might live near one but work near another. We want consistency. We want the experience to be the same. So we don't want people, writing their own classes. We don't want somebody coming in who's a new coach in the business and deciding that, on whatever night they're going to do CrossFit instead of doing our signature sweat class. Because you're going to have people come in and it's like, well, I signed up for sweat.
Why am I doing this?
Why am I doing CrossFit? That's not what I signed up for. So there does need to be a level of consistency across the sites. But what we do have to encourage is people to sort of leverage or to lean into the uniqueness of the demographic, because each site is different. The demographic is different in every site, and in some cases very different, but without murking the product. We still want the consistency of product, but for them to use their judgment and to make it fit to that person and that demographic.
You mentioned that you've got your own marketing person, and back in the IFBA days, it was a 30-day trial that you used to push out, and now it's a 21-day. What was the thinking behind changing that offer, and have you noticed any differences since running that at all?
There wasn't. The thinking was simplistic. Foundry had a 21-day challenge, and what Foundry had was they were very good at the brand and the front end, and W10 were much better at the back end. So the marriage value, if you like, of the transaction was that we take the brand equity and PR and all the rest of it, and the sales bit that Foundry have got, and we marry that up with the good operator, if you like, the good product W10 is. And Foundry were doing a 21-day challenge, and it was, they were selling units of it. And what I liked about it more than the 30-day trial is that the 30-day trial is evergreen. People could join at any time in the month, which was a plus. But also from a management perspective, it made it difficult to manage. We weren't selling to a date, and we couldn't apply scarcity. Yeah. So there was some sales tactics, if you like, that actually we weren't employing. What the 21-day challenge does, the word challenge sells better than a trial. A trial is pretty unsexy, right? A challenge, people, we pick our wording, challenge us, challenge yourself, whatever your challenge is, getting to the gym 3 days a week, getting off the sofa, getting started again, getting started at all, challenge yourself, and then challenge us to show you a different way. A gym doesn't need to be what you think it is. So I think we're careful with our wording, but we sell a 21-day challenge, and we sell to a cohort. We have cohort every month, so we have a start date every month. So say the 5th.
And so we all go through it at the same time together.
People start on the 5th.
Help with service and delivery?
100%. Yeah. Now, obviously, we do get some people who the 5th, on the 7th, I'd like to get started, and we'll get them started. But we start them to the 5th, so it means that we can say, we've got a certain amount of spaces on this date at this price, and we can market to that date. And come close out at the end of the month, we see sales post payday and at close out start to accelerate because we hammer the emails more and hammer text more and do what all sales environments do. But also it allows us on the 26th, we know that cohort, that cycle ends. Right, we box those off, we do our conversions, we know what the conversion number is going to be, give or take, and then we start the next cohort. So in terms of managing conversions and managing data, it's much cleaner.
To be able to go through, yeah.
To be able to do it through that process, and it is through a 30-day trial.
Because you might have someone that starts at the end of the month and someone that starts at the start of the month, and it's quite messy to kind of, where do you put that data to get a real clear picture of what's going on?
Yeah, and some of it's from simplicity from a management reporting standpoint. It's just easier for me and the team to look at the data when it sort of starts here and ends here, and it's just cleaner. And from a customer standpoint, most people have made their decisions after the end of the second week. They've pretty much decided whether they're staying or not after 14 days. But if you only do a 2-week trial or challenge, it's obviously you're selling in the second week. It's too early. They've only been there for 3 to 5 sessions. So 3 weeks is long enough for people to make a buying decision.
What would you say to the person or the gym owner that goes, I don't want to do challenges, I don't like doing challenges? I hear that a lot, but I would say they fall within that category that you mentioned earlier, where they've got maybe 100 to 150, they haven't had to market that much. And I think there's some sort of kind of moral issue of doing a challenge, essentially. So what would you say to those people?
You do what you feel comfortable with, but you must find what works. So don't get too up on your own personal sensitivities. Find something that is consistent and repeatable, and that you can say, I know works. So I can say, look, we're going to sell 100 of these every month. We know that we convert half of them. We might lose this number of people, so we'll grow by that number of people every month. And if I forecast that over the next 12 months, that's our growth targets. If I times that by the yield and factor in lifetime value and all the rest of it, this is the outcome that we can expect from our business over this next year. You have to find something that works. What you can't do is nothing. There's too many people sort of sitting there saying, I don't want to do certain things. I don't like, we get 300, 400 leads a month, right? And our lead to challenge is 30%. Now, some go into a longer funnel. We have a system at the back end that people aren't ready to buy yet. And every month we have people that signed up to that system 6 months ago, and they're ready to buy. But we have to shovel some shit, right? And there's too many people like, well, that person asked if we had a swimming pool. Crap lead. It's not, you're going to get some of that stuff. It's just the way it is.
It's always going to happen.
You just got to work through it. So, and if you don't want to do it that way, fine. Build your business on referrals only.
But you should have the expectation of where that's going to get you to.
How many referrals do you need a month? Can you generate 20 referrals a month?
For most people,
110
no.
members.
Yeah.
There comes a point at which your attrition meets your... At the beginning, you can build a business on referrals. You don't need to market, right? That's the truth. That was certainly my experience and my experience of others. But then there'll come a point where you're going to get whatever, no matter how good you are, you're going to get 2 or 3 leavers a month. And if you're only doing 4 or 5 referrals a month, right, and only 60, 70% of those are converting, the best you can do is stay still. So it's very common at that sort of somewhere between 80 and 120 members for people to just get themselves stuck and either be not brave enough or too stubborn to try and do a different sales approach. Now, there are some people that do 30-day trials. There are some people that do 21-day challenges. There are some people that do higher-end 12-week front-end offers. None of it is right or wrong. They're all right and they're potentially all wrong. It's just what works for you in your business, and there's pros and cons to all of them. But what you have to do is to run these things through a model and forecast forward and say, if we do these things over this period of time in this way, all other things being equal with the other data set, this is what we're going to get. You have to have that.
And you said you average 400 leads a month. Are they coming from multiple different channels, or is there a main source there for you?
Yeah, we're a bit fat on Meta. I think that's most people. So the fact of the matter is that direct marketing is a huge ROI through Meta still, even though it's not the golden goose it was maybe 5 years ago. It's more difficult now. The cost per acquisition there is between £50 and £100 for us, depending on.
And what are you selling your front end offer at?
179.
Oh, so you're creating profit to make a customer. And I think what a lot of people make a mistake with is, that front end offer is just to try and get them into your back end. So even if you break even to have an attempt to get someone as a long-term customer and your lifetime value's there, you are going to win. But obviously, ideally, you want to make some sort of profit.
Yeah, look, there's loads of, ours is at 179 and our opening membership is 329. So there's a big gap between our challenge and our first membership price. But our conversion is over what's in our budget, right? As individual sites and as a group. Now, it might be that if we bump that up to £249 for 21 days, we might increase our conversion rate. But we might sell less people. So yeah, we might convert at 80%, but we might only sell 10 and not 20.
So it goes at a lower, yeah.
So I'd rather convert 50, 60% of 20, 10 to 12 versus 60, 80% of 10, right? Because I'm still going to sell more membership. So if I forecast forward in the model, I match that against my attrition. So I think you've got to model it. You've got to. There's lots of people that do a high barrier front end, but don't sell many of them. And when they marry that up to their attrition at the back end, and they forecast forward a year or two, their business is in deep shit because they're going to become reliant on that front end revenue.
We spoke about this earlier before recording. There's a few people that are now trialing this and running this, high ticket front end to the back end, but it hasn't really run long enough to be able to see whether it's going to be effective or not. But your stance is based on lifetime value, it might cause you some issues later on down the line.
My stance is I don't know. Like until we have a data. So like if we sell at 179 quid for our challenge, and it's 21 days. If I could sell that at £1,000, or 500 quid, all things being equal, if conversions were the same, if I could sell the same number, if my conversion was the same, if my attrition level stayed the same, if my LTV remained unaffected, it's an absolute no-brainer. I'm better off. But if any of those variables changes at the back end considerably, either I don't sell enough of them, or a combination of I don't sell as many of them and they don't convert as well, and my attrition goes up, well, that might be a bad move. So it's not until you've got the data set that goes alongside it that you can say that is a good or a bad thing, and that's probably not going to know for a year or two. But the only thing you can do is say, okay, if I'm going to make it more expensive, so I'm going to increase the barrier to entry, the likelihood is that I'm going to sell less of them. So let me model it. Let's say that I cut that in half, and let's say that I keep the same conversion rate, and let's say that I keep the same retention rate. At least do some sort of due diligence through modelling to say, well, if it behaves in this way, I'll be okay. If it behaves in that way, I'm okay. But if it behaves in this way, we might have a bit of a problem. So if we start to see patterns or data sets or trends in that direction, we better keep a close eye so that we don't wake up one day and go, what happened?
So it's something to monitor, but yeah, I agree. Like the results, we've got some clients that are running it and they're making front end sales, and obviously very happy with that front end cash that's coming into the business. But it's too early days to actually see, is that a good long term strategy? For sure.
I think the notion that most people undercharge is probably true, right? You have to earn the right to charge what you're charging, and I think that's probably some legacy stuff where we all sort of were a bit apologetic coming into the market. So, most people are undercharging. I don't think the answer is just to rock up on day one and just change your prices. But I think you've got to model it. And the mistake that I see some people making, not just at the front end, but generally, is they don't have enough of an understanding of the data and the likely impacts of, data shifts one way or another. And I think, in order to, after a certain point, I don't think you need to do this when you've got 50 members. It's just overkill. You should know it on the back of your hand. Yeah, so don't go and create systems for 50, 100, 150 members that you need for 1,000. You do need at least, either a back of a fag packet understanding, if we're in a smaller gym, or a very, modelled, and detailed understanding of what the likely impact is of things behaving in a certain way. And you need sort of contingencies and, good, better, best type stuff in order to make educated decisions. What you shouldn't do is just on a whim change shit.
Just because you feel like it, go, I'll give this a change.
People get bored. And there's always someone to tell you, like, if you do this is a good idea. In fact, you can pay me for the privilege. And I've been that person. And it's all comes from a great place. I'm not saying no one's being disingenuous here. People believe what they're selling, presumably, hopefully. But, first I'd want to see some examples of people who've done it over a period of time. And I'd also want to just run it through my own filter. Think for yourself. Don't just blindly go, I'm a bit bored, or I'm not making the money I want, or I want to do things differently, so I'm going to just throw a grenade at it. Yeah, because it will blow up one way or another, and it might land the way you want it to, but it might not.
You just don't really know.
You just don't know.
It's a little bit like that gymowner who builds a business, does everything right, but because they didn't model it correctly at the start, they're never ever going to win. And you're kind of doing that again without properly looking through the numbers, essentially.
And there are some people who are like cats. They're going to land, and it's brilliant. There are other people for whom it might not work out quite as well. So I think it is just worth doing your own thinking and your own due diligence in any change you're going to make, or before you do anything in the business.
Nice. We spoke about location 1, location 2, and this probably won't apply for many people, but obviously going from 2 to 3 to 5 locations that you're now running, what are the lessons that you've learned from a leadership perspective? Were there any challenges along the way that you had to overcome that you didn't foresee because you haven't ran 5 before? Like how has that process been, going from 1 to 2 to all the way to 5?
Running 5 gyms is no different to running 1. You're just running 5 individual gyms. You've got a head office team, there's more people, and of course, as we talked about earlier, there are more nuances, more problems, more conversations. It's just a numbers game. We had a very specific set of circumstances in so much as we brought 2 businesses together that ran very differently, not just operationally, but also culturally, the way we communicated. It wasn't just what we said, it's how we said it. The tone of the business changed as part of our rebrand. Our rebrand just wasn't our logo or our colours. It was how we engage with our staff. It's how we engage with our customers. That's part of your brand too. So we had a massive rebranding, not just externally, which is the bit that people will sort of will understand, but also internally. And that was probably more tricky. And then, of course, when you recontract or re-engage with staff in a certain way, you in turn have to do that with customers because they're tied to the staff. The relationships matter. So we went through quite it was harder than I thought it was going to be, but it was a tough but interesting, learning rich journey over the last 12 to 18 months. I don't think operationally we what we did when we went in was we stripped everything out. We just said, look, we're just going to sell 3 membership options, and we're only going to do coaching. We're not going to do any secondary spend. We're going to turn off our nurture sequences and all that. We're going to take the business back to base, so we know what to manage, because there's so many moving parts here. We can't see the wood for the trees. And actually that reset has been really, really helpful, because I think a couple of things. One is going into a business where there's some bad habits have been, you can see the outcome of them. Because sometimes we talk about these things in theory, but we've never experienced them in practice. We've seen what it does if you don't do it, in the right way. But also we've then been able to sort of layer back on in the business the bits that, all right, well, we probably overcorrected in some bits. Like we probably it's probably too little on offer, and it's probably too stripped back.
Where would you say you may have overcorrected slightly in terms of simplifying things?
I don't honestly know yet. We obviously we don't do any retail or secondary spend, and we should do some of that. We don't offer any apparel, which we're not going to. Economies of scale says we're not going to make loads of money on apparel unless we go online, and we're not going to make unit sales through. We're not going to be a retailer. So there's a few bits like that we sort of need to sort of to increase. One of the biggest challenges now for us is that is getting the team not to layer stuff back in. Like my one of the things I end up spending most of my time doing now is getting us to stop doing things, not to do more things.
Stop saying yes to certain things. And
do we need that?
Yeah.
Or let's add this. Why?
Does it align with that goal that's been set for the business, or
will it change our membership total? Will it change our yield? Will it affect our member journey and in terms of customer satisfaction and attrition and lifetime value? It is, do we genuinely believe there will be a tangible impact on, and sometimes it's hard to say, right? Because the word tangible is difficult because it's an experience. It's not a physical product. But actually, I think there's a sophistication in simplicity. We've got to try and keep this as simple as possible, because then we can deliver savagely well on those simple basics, rather than trying to be all things to all people. And you can see that happening a little bit, certainly in the London market at the moment, with wellness and different class types and ice baths and saunas and meditation classes and wellness. And it would be so easy, because of the pace at which the conversation's moving,
to go, should we get some ice baths in the gym?
And to just keep changing shit.
Yeah.
And invest in it. And actually it's a bit like post-COVID. Everybody was like, oh, it's going to go online and the brick and mortar business is dead. And some of us say, oh, there's going to be a digital wraparound, and some will come in and they'll do some at home. Some in the brick and mortar space, they'll have some classes online in your online studio. And we're all wrong.
Do you think people need to slow down a little bit in terms of looking at where things are going potentially?
I think so. You want to be an innovator and you want to be an early adopter. So there's a fine balance between that and just coming late to the party, and being dopey and sort of waking up and going, maybe we should do that. But I think, you've got to be constantly reminding yourself and your team about what it is you do. We deliver coaching, inside a community vehicle, and we're heavy on customer service and experience, and we do that really, really, really well.
And it's almost like this new thing that you're going to look to implement, if you're not going to have that same level of standard and value, then is it worth doing to jeopardize? Because you might jeopardize the core service potentially, or. But
also, I think a lot of this stuff is like, this is what the consumer wants. It's like, said whom? It wasn't the consumer, was it? It was the sector. You have decided, in some cases, it's struggling mid-market chains at the moment are saying, well, we need more focus on wellness and meditation and mindful classes, and we're going to stand in the mirror and we're going to build resilience. It's like, well, yeah, I can't see that working. And you're just trying to find ways to reposition yourself in a market. We're just sort of saying, look, we do what we do really, really well. Now, if we were to, wellness is a thing, longevity is a thing. Right, that's the way the sector's moving. And actually for us, it's a great thing because we train an older, active aging population. It's perfect. But our members are not going to come and sit in an ice bath in a room out the back of our gym next to each other, reading the paper and chatting away. They're just going to have a cold shower. Or they're going to buy their own ice bath. Right? And if they want a sauna, they'll either buy a sauna sleeping bag or they'll buy a sauna. They're probably not going to come in and sit next to our other members and sweat in public. So it doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that that would be the wrong thing for us to just rush to adopt that as a and to be honest, we've been through this cycle already. 15 years ago, it was all about holistic health and wellness and the yin to the yang, and this isn't a new cycle we're moving through.
So is it a possibility that these things that people are assuming this is where the industry are going are just another set of trends potentially, because we don't have the long-term data to know?
Yeah. And you take a punt, don't you? Because if you get it right and you ride the wave.
Yeah, I know a gym that has they've got a sauna and ice bath. They have quite a big unit, but it's like a separate, but right next to the gym. It's performing really, really well. I don't know too many case studies, but I know that one for sure that is doing quite well. But is that going to go across the UK? Is that going to be the next thing for a long time? I think, as you said, the reality is the data isn't quite there yet to actually determine.
Yeah, and that might be a separate space, and that might be in a market where their demographic might be younger, might be 25 to 35. It might be the more training, that they love training. Yeah, and they're into their recovery, and they're younger, and they like getting topless and shirts off and whatever in because it's part of the brand, and that wouldn't work for a 55 plus. Don't like the gym, never been to the gym, failed in the gym market. So I think it's horses for courses for sure. I think the other consideration is if you look at the States as an example of, they're not necessarily ahead of us in terms of training, the technical side of training, but they are ahead of us in terms of trends. So you're getting gyms that are infrared sauna and cryotherapy, who are also doing IV drips. They're doing there are recovery gyms. There are sleep gyms. If you try and be all things to all people, at some point someone's going to come in and go, we specialise in saunas and IV and infrared. Well, that leaves you a bit stuck, because you're not the world's best training gym, you're not the world's best recovery gym, you're sort of all jack of all, master of none. So I think it's very easy to get caught in that trap. And most of us are operating on limited space and limited resources. We just need to have real clear focus on real clear KPIs and stick with it. My
last question was actually going to be like, where do you see the industry going? But my takeaway from what you just said is, before you look to expand or innovate in any of these trends that seem to be emerging, are you doing the best possible job, within that hour or 50 minutes that they come in on the coaching floor? Is that max to the full? And only then maybe you should look at, is this going to increase the value and the customer journey essentially?
If you're doing it well enough for long enough, you probably should be bored, right? Because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to sell at the front end, convert these people, retain these people, repeat. That's it. It's not. You just need to stick to the basics and just modify it's an evolution rather than a revolution. I like if you want a cheesy phrase, but you just need to just stick with it. And sometimes it's not innovation is just doing the same thing doing the same thing for long enough, that becomes trendy. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not suggesting that we do nothing, because there is a fine balance here, but just don't overcorrect and just don't be trend led. Just stick to the model.
And how I said that was my last question, but I lied. How do you look to innovate your products and service? Obviously, you want to keep it simple, keep it down to the core. The core service, but how are you kind of looking to tinker it and improve it and kind of increase by those 1% metrics?
I think a large part of that is just making sure that we are. I fully buy into that. Something can be really good, but overall, but shit in that moment. Right, and that's a concept I think that most of us could need to get a bit more comfortable with. Like it's, and nothing's going to be perfect, but we need to strive to make sure that every paint chip and every dumbbell at handle is tight, and every bike is spotlessly clean. And I think that is part of an innovation, because a lot of people don't do that very well. And if you can just do those things really well, have a functioning booking system that's got no friction, be clean, have access, have engaged staff that are on brand at all times, in and out of the gym. Most people are struggling just to do those basics. Outside of that, I go to the States once or twice a year, and I am a customer, and not just in the fitness space. I think hotels, restaurants. I don't live the high life, but I try as often as I can to have lunch in a nice restaurant, and be a customer in a premium environment where they've got better standards than us, if you like, as a sector. And I think I take more from other sectors probably day to day than I do from the fitness space, because I think most people in the fitness space aren't blazing a trail. So it just doesn't make sense to me to just look too closely there. It makes more sense to me to look at others.
Go in other industries and see what they're doing from a customer service
If you want to improve your
standpoint.
customer journey, go to Nike, go to Apple, right? If you want to improve
See how simple it is as well.
just go through, just like you go to Nike and the handle is a tick. You open this massive Hogwarts style door, and there's a great big TV at the front of the stairs showing you their lead product. You go down the stairs and there's someone who looks like an athlete who's got bushy hair and is wearing all the Nike gear, who can direct you to, I want a pair of these things, and they can tell you it's on the third floor around the back. Like, it's the customer journey is so brilliant. Same with Apple in their own way. If you want to experience good service, go to a certain hotel or a certain group or a restaurant or something where they're renowned for that stuff, and go through the process. What does it feel? Not how nice is the food. You go to a hotel in New York and it's, what's the concierge? How do you greet it at the door? What does the reception look like? Is it remarkable? Like, how do they engage with you? What moments do they sort of wow you? When you go to your room, it's like, they're going to be tiny because you're in New York, but what's in the minibar?
Creating these small memorable moments that get people to actually talk about the service and kind of enhance that word of mouth power.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming down and being on the podcast. I mentioned it a couple of times. I'm a big fan of the email that gets sent out. Where can people find that and subscribe to it?
I've got a website. It's jcv.inc. I'm pretty crap on social. It's something I every year promise myself I'll re-engage with, but I haven't up until that point. So yeah, jcv.inc.
And are the podcast episodes still live?
The old IFBA ones are not currently, but our plan is to resurrect those and release those once a week.
Okay, nice. Well, yeah, looking forward to when those come out, because I listened to a number of them and I found them immensely valuable. And if you're a gym owner, you basically just tell everyone you've got a staff an episode, you've got a program an episode, and I think if you're a gym owner, it was very, very good. So when that does come out, I highly recommend everyone go out and recommend that. And again, thank you for coming down and being on the podcast.
No problem. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Marketing Agency podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you can catch future episodes.